Hi, I'm Adam and this is the UplinkPort. And in today's episode we are actually going to get either the RAD or the Hatteras networks into service and this whole EFM SHDSL or SHDSL project hopefully drawn to a close. So whether you're into retro networking gear or just curious on how things work, stick around. Right, so before we go any further, I need to give a massive thank you to anyone that has taken the time to support me over on Patreon, and also anyone that's bought anything from the merchandise store. Speaking of merchandise, I'm actually wearing the new hoodie that we started stocking over on Tmail. This isn't me plugging the store at all, it's literally me just saying I wear what I actually sell you guys. So if you do want to go and get something, go and grab it. The link is in the video description below. But more importantly, the Patreons, I cannot thank you enough. I was really apprehensive about offering it, but with the people that have come on board and supported me, it does show me that you guys do genuinely care about what I do. Please make sure you are taking care of yourselves first before you donate any of your hard-earned money to me. But thank you. I was really struggling with how I was going to say thank you for all of it. What I will do is throw names up on screens during videos, which for this video, that will be now. You've also got access to things that are going on behind the scenes, and have actually started to do that as well over on Patreon with all of this. You'll also get access to Discord, and I will be setting up a special role for everyone that is actually over on Patreon as well. Don't feel that you need to do any of that. Simply clicking subscribe and liking the videos is more than enough. Just make sure you're looking after yourselves first. That's all I ask. This channel, as it grows, costs do get a bit more with it. Obviously, shipping pallets of stuff from Zen does get quite expensive, but I do it simply for the subs and the likes and giving you guys content. This channel has grown beyond my wildest dreams already, and it will continue to do so. So anyone that has taken the time to subscribe to me on Patreon, thank you very much. If you do want to, the link is in the video description, but again, don't feel you need to. Right, moving on to what we're going to be doing for today. The RAD, the Hatteras and the Draytek. The Draytek is going to one side. I mentioned it in the last video, but for some reason I took it out during editing. It is ATM based, so it was never going to work. I simply got sidetracked with the fact that it said SHDSL on the front of it and the DSLAM said SHDSL. It is SDSL based, but it is the old ATM standard, so it's looking for ATM cells, which obviously the MSAN or that DSLAM doesn't do. So we're going to move that to one side. We might revisit it at some point in the future, because if we get two Drayteks, we can set one of them up for CO, which is central office or exchange side, and the other one is CPE. So we could create a 2 meg link effectively between those two, but for now, it's going out of the way. We're going to focus on what actually has the best chance of working. One of which is the RAD, because that did come into sync in the last video. The Hatteras networks was having absolutely none of it. Doing some research in the background, I can kind of understand why. The Hatteras does seem to be vendor locked, because Hatteras do have their own head end that typically would have sat in the exchange and just sends its configuration to this device. So we need to see if we can turn that off. The problem I've got is the Hatteras, or this particular 408-CP, there's no manual for it whatsoever online, so I'm going in blind with all of this. The one that showed the most promise is the RAD box. That did sync in the last video. Now, in that last video, I had completely lost all enthusiasm towards the end. We got the DSLAM online, which was great, but seeing ADVA, which all the config work I've done on ADVA recently, and just realizing how much of a mountain that is to climb, that really put me off. And also I did read about the RAD also having some form of ADVA heritage as well, so I really wasn't in the mindset to be doing it. That has changed slightly. Over on Discord we have what's called the TX or RX network, which basically stands for Technology Exchange Resource Exchange. It is a VPN community in the background. I've got a load of co-location where people can spin up images for the channel, do their own projects, but most importantly, it operates as a hub and spoke network, which basically means that people on the VPN can agree to peer with one another and access each other's resources across the VPN. Now, I have mine on here by default. What that does mean is people on the TXRX network, which are a selected group of trusted individuals at the minute, but they get access to all the kit I have here, all the web interfaces and everything like that. And one of the community members I kind of threw this out to say, have a look at it if you want. That gentleman is called Brad. Brad is one of the community members that came on board right at the beginning, who took the time to rewrite the SIP server software for the BT Home Hub that enabled me to actually get that working and progress that video. He has stepped up. Not only did he take time to go and look around the DSLAM, he also took time to understand the EFM protocol and actually write documentation up for me as to what I was missing, because although these sync, it turns out that EFM is a highly customizable protocol in the background, and profiles need to be set in order to basically get these to communicate or do anything other than sync. All of those are in place. There has been a bit of back and forth trying to make sure that these still stay in service, which they seem to have been, but we have no backhaul network between the DSLAMs and the rest of the network. So that's what I need to do next. I actually need to configure all the backhaul side of stuff to get this to work. Now, something that some people pulled me up in the last video, and rightly so. I always say, if I've done something wrong, or if you've got a suggestion, please raise your hand in the comments and say, Adam, you've been an idiot. One of the most things that kept coming up is the fact that I was referring to the DSLAM as a switch. It's not a switch, and rightly so. I was simply getting the way I was trying to explain this wrong. What I should have been explaining was this is a bridge, in that it is bridging technology types, i.e. EFM to Ethernet. Now, as I understand it, all of these should be bridging its default configuration. So it should be bridging the SDS or EFM port to the Ethernet port. What that means is once this plugs in, it should just pass through the traffic to the DSLAM. The DSLAM is also configured in bridge as well between the active service port and the EFM cards that are in there. So that should just be passing across the network. What that ultimately means is if I run DHCP on the network and tag it through, was in the port, then in theory DHCP should be available to any device that gets plugged in on the Ethernet side, on the SDSL side. So in theory that means that we should just set up DHCP in the network, plug a client into it, it should get a DHCP address and should just come online. In theory. Whether that works in practice or not, I don't know, but what is one of my videos without me setting a really high standard and me coming in nothing close to it. I'm excited to see if it's going to work. I'd love to get the Hatteras working, because the Hatteras has 8 lines that we can actually bond, so there's a potential of about 40 meg, whereas the RAD only does 4 on this particular model. There's another one that does only 2. But I'd love to get the Hatteras working, because I do need to give the RAD back to John at some point. And obviously I've got all the cables nicely made for the Hatteras as well, with the OEM cables for it as well. So I think what we'll do now is jump onto screen capture, configure the backhaul network and give this the best possible chance. And then we'll just plug this in and plug a device into it and see if it grabs an address from the network and see where we go from there. Right, so here's the current lay of the land. Now I know that there are a load of labels missing and a few things that need to be changed. I will do some of those as I do the SDSL stuff. This was simply in the last video to give you an idea as to how everything is connected. One of the things I'd love to do is directly connect the Access and BNG together and sort the config out for that. The CISCO only has 2 ports on it because I do not have another interface card to be able to do that, but that's being swapped out with the MikroTik that does have more ports on it. But I'm still not going to do it because this is a working configuration at a minute and I need to get everything working before I start playing with anything else and causing more issues. So the CISCO is going to get swapped out with the MikroTik, and then we will create another link back into the CISCO switch. We will tag another VLAN all across the backhaul, bring that out on the ADVA and connect the ADVA back into the Zhone. I'm going to go off and just quickly throw that together now, and then I'll come back as to how that's put together, and then we'll go off and do it. So hopefully this is a lot easier to read. I've changed the colour scheme, I've added information in when necessary, and I've actually just realised I still haven't added the DNS IP address in. Not that it's relevant for any of this. What is relevant is I have taken out the CISCO and put in the MikroTik. Now annoyingly the cables from the CISCO do not reach to the MikroTik ports that I would have liked. That being said, the MikroTik's already set up for Ethernet 10 back into the ZYXEL anyway, so that is what it is. I can't change that, and obviously we configured this after the fact when it wasn't plugged in. I would have liked the port 4 VLAN 44 to be on the Ethernet 4, but it's not. I'm not messing around remaking cables. I will just live with it. I will tidy it up over Christmas. Now, this would have given me the perfect opportunity to set up the link between the BNG and the Axis. However, doing this would have involved config changes, and as I said, I don't want to be changing any of the core config until we've got all the SDSL stuff or the SHDSL stuff working, because any changes I make here, I want to know work. And once this is all set up, I know if I break something, it's because of what I've changed here. So what I have changed, and the only thing I have added or will be adding in, is Ethernet 6 is online or will be online on the MikroTik. We will be using VLAN 44. That's going into CISCO port 4. VLAN 44 needs to be built and tagged all across the ADVA network. That's going to go into the ADVA GE114, which is in the Exchange cabinet. That is coming off on port 4, which will be tagged on VLAN 44. Now, I am having to use the SFP interface for all of this. Now, I did plug in a copper to SFP module into the Zhone, because I've got one, and the interface on the Zhone slowed to a crawl, and when it did load up the status page, it didn't even report the SFP being plugged into it. So there's obviously some sort of issue with the SFP and the encoding and the vendor information on that. Plugging back in a normal SFP for multi-mode, because it did have a single mode cable in, or single mode SFP in it, was absolutely fine. The device is quite happy responding as it should be, so I have left that in, and I will configure the ADVA for SFP handoff as well. One little annoying thing, as I mentioned in the previous video, is VLAN 1, or the default VLAN, I was having issues with on the ADVA. Now, Dave, who sits in Discord, which is actually a ex-Zen employee that worked on all the ADVA equipment, has given me some tips for actually changing that and hopefully getting that to work. I just haven't implemented it yet. What I have done is literally taken the port off of the ADVA that's got that default VLAN passed through into an unmanaged switch, and then there are two feeds going into the ADSL.DSLAM and the SDSL.DSLAM, just so I can manage those moving forward. Now, moving forward, the only thing I need to do is set up VLAN 44 across the backhaul, so I'm going to go and jump onto the CISCO and configure that first, and then we'll filter that all across the network. I lied slightly. I'm actually going to jump into Winbox and do the MikroTik configuration, because from what I can remember, the MikroTik used to do DHCP and everything before we moved on to Radius, and I don't recall deleting. I'm pretty sure I just disabled it all, which if I did, it's a quick in and out to change the interfaces and set it all back up, and we can move on. Now, I'm doing this in full screen mode purely because Winbox is sat literally below me and it is bright white, and I know some people suffer with bright white screens. Also, some people watch this at night and you're about to be blinded by Winbox. MikroTik, if you are listening, at the time of recording this, I am running version 3.43 and I do not see any option to enable dark mode in the Winbox EXE. Please implement the ability to turn this into dark mode if you haven't already. I'm not running the beta release of version 4. It needs to be in the current release. There's no reason why it shouldn't be or hasn't been already, and I know there are quite a few people on the forums saying the same thing. So please, if I've missed something, someone shout, but if I haven't, everyone jump on the MikroTik. This should very much be supporting dark mode. But moving on, that one. Right, there are a few things that we need to do. Number one, I need to disable this interface. In fact, I'm just going to be lazy and copy it. I'm going to put this on 2 for the gateway, and I'm going to put this on port 6. And then I am going to disable this one. No, I don't want to remove. I'm going to disable that. That's going to remove the network conflict, and DSL should still come up and bridge across, and we shouldn't see any issues. I will have to test that, but they should get around any routing issues with having 2 IP addresses within the same range on 2 separate interfaces. Let's go and type in Zhone on here so we know what port that is, and then under let's just see if we've still got the pools here. Yes, we do. We've still got the IP pool, so that means I'm fairly confident in that the server's still here. Here it is. So let's go into here. Let's change this to Zhone DHCP. Let's change the interface to 6. That's on the correct address pool. I'll apply that. Okay, that. Enable that, and then jump into the networks, and we need to change the gateway to .2. That's fine on the DNS. Perfect. In theory, everything should be set up now on the MikroTik to chuck out DHCP from this pool on port 6, which is the Zhone, and just pass everything across. We'll go and do the CISCO now and set up all the VLANs on that. Right, I'm logged into the CISCO. The first thing that we need to do is actually create that VLAN, and I'm trying to remember where is it. Oh, it's in here. Let's give that VLAN 44, and what have we called everything else? Let's call it Exchange. Oh, does that if I can spell EX? No, EX Exchange, and then we'll call it Zhone DSLAM. I'll apply that. And then we are going to go into port memberships. We're going to add it to the trunk. Add it to the trunk. It was this that wasn't loading properly on Firefox. And then we are going to go to port 4. Oh no, we need to change the interface first to access. So I'll put that on access. And then we're going to go port LAN memberships, and we're going to join port 4 to, we need to take that out first, then in there. Right, VLAN 44 is on the trunk, it's on the access port, it's defined as a VLAN. So in theory, that should be passing that off across to the adver. So we now need to go and configure the adver with all of that as well, which is going to be fun because I cannot remember for the life of me how to do that in the adver. But we need to set up a flow for that and create the VLANs to go across on that. You join me back at the advert, and don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with me configuring this. I have already done it off camera. You have seen me configure these devices more than enough times over the past couple of videos. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go and watch the last advert video, because I go through configuring this in depth, as well as losing all my hair and marbles in the process, because this was not fun. But it did enable me to get a basic understanding of how all of these work, to be able to configure additional flows moving forward. And just to recap what I have actually already done, port 4 is now configured for fibre. It's configured for EVPL, which stands for Ethernet Virtual Private Line. That is on VLAN 44. That gives us the ability to create our own flow, which I have done. Push VID is set up, which is also popping it off of the access interface on the adver for VLAN 44 on the customer tag. VLAN 44 is part of the members, and all the polices are set up. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that gives me the ability to pass traffic now from the MikroTik across to CISCO, across the adver, and into the Zhone, and hopefully whatever we plug into the RAD should actually work and get a DHCP address. That's assuming the configuration that Brad has put in place on the Zhone works. That's something I've actually not shown you guys yet, and I will show you, assuming that it does all work. Now, I'm going to quickly walk over what I've done, purely because I have this, which is a DJI Osmo 8. It was given to me as a gift for my birthday, who's also a member of the channel, Francisco. Francisco, if you're watching, thank you very much. But this will give me the ability to hopefully create really nice walking around of stabilized videos. And yeah, give me a new toy. So let's go and put this to use, and I will show you how everything is physically wired, and then we will plug in the RAD. So this is currently how the data center rack is looking at the second. The first obvious thing is everything is nicely labeled. If you want to go and print really nice labels, go and grab a Nimbot. They are fantastic. This isn't sponsored. I will throw a link to the one I'm using in the video description. They are just inexpensive, do a really nice job, and I've been using this one for years now. But obviously at the top, PDU bar, underneath that we have our access device, which is going off to our structured layer 2 FTTP connection. We have the Cisco BNG that I've currently unplugged. We have our Cisco switch, which I've referred to as a core switch at the second. It's really not. And then underneath that, we've got our MikroTik BNG. Ethernet 1 is untagged. It's going into the Cisco switch, but it's what has access to the radius, default route, DNS, and all of that, which basically makes its way up to Ethernet 2. Ethernet 10, which is going off to the ZYXEL DSLAM, which is doing all the ADSL stuff, and then the new link, which is Ethernet 6, which is going into port 4, which is unlabeled, ironically, but that is going into our Zhone. That is then obviously going across our trunk port, which is going into the adver EGX, which is then going off to the adver GE114 in the Exchange cabinet, which is where we're off to now. So not much has changed in the Exchange cab really. Port 5 still goes down to the management, which is going via the unmanaged switch, which I'll show you in a minute. Port 6 is an alarm purely because the ZYXEL DSLAM is turned off. Port 1 is still our network to network interconnect, which is going off via the EGX chassis. And then port 4 is going off down to the Zhone. If I scroll down to the bottom of the cabinet, we have our unmanaged switch, which is just breaking out the management links to be able to go and manage these. And then that fibre link comes into port 2 on the Zhone, and that is it. Now, interestingly, this still all is an alarm. That fault light is because that card is not configured. But the critical alarm from all of this is being generated because ports 3, 4 and 5 don't have a link. There is no way I can disable any of that from what I can see, so I'm just going to have to live with it. I still need to sort out the fan tray anyway, so at least I can eliminate one of the lights potentially. However, that's being generated from a low RPM value, so potentially not. Either way, it is what it is, but hopefully all of this should now work. Okay, so I've been trying to work out the best way to capture this because my overhead camera just doesn't work with this. So I've currently got my phone capturing that particular display at the second. You'll also note the yellow cable in the background. That is going between port 6 on the MikroTik directly into the laptop to prove DHCP is working. And if I jump to this screen, it is indeed working. Now this isn't going through the EFM or anything like that. That will be the next step, and somewhere on the screen I will throw up the overlay from my phone. Now ports 24 to 21 on the Zhone are connected. That is to the RAD box. One thing I have noticed is that the WAN light on the RAD box is now solid green. It is no longer amber. Amber basically meant there is a pair down and it was just a generic warning, but all 4 of those are green, so they do seem to be all connected. All these speeds are reporting back at the full 5.6 megabits per second, and they've actually been plugged in for a while because I went and got lunch while I was mentally preparing myself for all of this. But we know the DHCP server is working because that laptop has an IP address, and you should hopefully be able to see it pinging away in the background. What I now need to do is clear that lease, change all the cables around, plug the laptop into the RAD box and see if this works. Just to note, this is only plugged into a 100 meg port on the MikroTik, so that speed test result was completely valid. Alright, I'm going to unplug port 6 from the MikroTik and plug in port 6 into the CISCO switch. Now we're going to unplug our yellow cable, which is going off up to the MikroTik. And at this point in time, everything should be coming down this cable. I really don't know what to expect. I was not expecting that. That is a response. Is Wi-Fi's not on? No. Let's do a test. I'm assuming this will be around 20 meg if it is going via the Ethernet, which it is, or the EFM. That is, oh, that's amazing. That just works. That means it's bridging everything the whole way across. That is absolutely amazing. Let's do, I think it's, oh, it's show more info to do the upload test, which it is, it's 20 meg. That is the 5 meg per port. That is absolutely awesome. So I was not expecting that to just work. I was fully expecting to see request timeouts and things just not work. I mean, nothing ever just works first time on this channel. That has really taken me by surprise, and it is super cool to see that all working again. Now, part of that is probably going to be down to Brad and some of the bits he's done in the background. If I jump back over to this one, the Zhone has logged me out. Just for reference, I did clear this lease from the DHCP server before I did anything. The MAC address is identical because it's not changed, and again, it's kind of irrelevant because traffic is flowing on it. But that did get released, that has come back up. If I jump back onto the Zhone, I will show what Brad has actually spent the time doing. Now, the biggest thing I overlooked with all of this is this, which is PME, which stands for Physical Medium Entity. It's what actually tells the ports what to do. It creates bond groups. There's a fair few things it does. The first thing we needed to set up was this, was the region. Region 2 is European. All of that's been set up. The 2B constellation Also needed to be set up as adaptive, which basically limits the amount of speed or the speed profiles that you can have, and then within that you can actually define various speed profiles. So adaptive is anything between 768 kilobits per second to 5,696 kilobits per second. So if we enabled that, we can then actually physically rate limit these down to 2 megabits per second, which is what it would have been in the UK for SDSL, but I believe AFM was the full 5.6 meg or 5 meg, so that had to be set up. We have a PME config. You'll have to excuse me jumping back and forth. I can't remember where half the stuff is on this myself. All of this is still standard. We had to set up bond groups, and I have these set up. We've got other profiles that we've been doing with, but Brad created bond group 25, which all the ports are in, and basically that is exactly that. It's a bond group. It will basically bond all those ports together, and you can have multiple different profiles, and then you can the profiles appear in here, and then you can assign the slots to it. It's not very user intuitive because you've got EFM slot 1 and EFM slot 26. The only difference here is the actual profile IDs, which you define in bond groups. I think it was, I can't remember where it was. Let's just have a look at the table. Okay, so here are the bond groups. You've got 25 and 26. Obviously 26 is down because we've been messing around with other things, but 25 is the one that's currently in place for the RAD. So all of that had to be put into place, and there is some network bits in the back for bridging effectively all of this rather than network to network configuration. But Brad, thank you very much for taking the time to sort the profiles out in the background, and also all the documentation for it for me to understand what you've done as well, because without that, none of the bonding groups would have been working, so I owe you a massive thank you. Now, what's next? Next is the Hatteras. Now, the Hatteras I have no documentation for whatsoever. I don't even know where I've put it. I need to try and get that working. That will be the ultimate thing that will make me happy. I used to physically play around, and we used to do with the RADs as well. The RADs were typically talk, and the Hatteras was typically BT wholesale. But either way, they both mean a lot to me. I'm really happy I've got the RAD working. But the RAD I do need to give back to John at some point, so I want to get the Hatteras working, because then I have my own bonding CPE as well. So I'm really excited. I am thrilled that just works. It's still there, sat there, pinging in the background. That is super cool. Right. The Hatteras is going to give me a headache. I know it is, because everything on that is powered by Adva, whatever that means. I'm not looking forward to this. I'm probably going to have a bit of a dig into it off camera to try and understand some of the CLIs and commands. Try and see if I can find any documentation for it, so I will come back to you as we start progressing through it. Believe it or not, days have passed. Although it doesn't look like it in here, many days have indeed passed, to the point where I now have a USB to HDMI capture device to better capture things off of the workbench rather than using my phone. And it's little things like this that add up over time. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure you get subscribed. It's the best way to support the channel, and also helping me pay for little bits like this other than Patreon. But if you do go down that route, make sure that you have paid for everything yourself before giving me any of your hard-earned money. Now, the Hatteras, where are we with that? That has been an absolute nightmare. I am so happy to actually see this particular output, and also 4 out of the 8 lights on the Hatteras are solid green, and according to this output they are actually connected. According to this, we're connected at 5,704 kilobits per second. The uptimes vary based on when I actually ran that output. SNR and local loop attention, along as well as the 2 base, which is 1001, which is actually the bond group that all these sit in. Now, I wanted to get to a point where we could actually continue this together, and I feel I'm now at this point because they've not been static green for days. So I'm hopeful that this bridging that we had on the RAD also applies to this as well. However, all the command structure for this is ridiculous. This isn't like a normal advert that I've played with before. At least with the other adverts I've had documentation. This I have had no documentation for whatsoever. I've actually had to go and reference commands online in little bits, and also international documents that were in different languages that I've had to get translated, that have caused their own issues because of how they were translated. But I captured one of my terminal outputs for this, and well, as you can see, I've been at this for a while. This doesn't do it justice. This is just literally one of the sessions I did, and a lot of it revolves around the configuration command. But it did enable me to actually put together a subset of commands that I've actually been using to configure all of this, which have actually come in really helpful, because I discovered the Hatteras doesn't actually save its settings, and if you power it off it loses everything, which I had to do because I had to do some work on the bench, and I also at the time completely forgot that it was turned on and had a heart attack when I turned it back on because it didn't sync. Putting these commands back in has actually restored it back to service. So you're going to have to bear with me, because I'm more than likely going to get some explanation on all of this wrong. So much has happened between now and then that I've honestly lost the will to live. I have made physical notes which I'm looking at now, and even those start to make no sense either, but I'm going to try and explain to the best of my ability exactly how we've got to the point we are now. Now, the biggest thing with all of this is that the Hatteras, as I alluded to earlier, might be vendor locked, and that is indeed the case. And by vendor locked I mean it's actually specifically looking for the Hatteras network head end, that once it connects to it, downloads its config. When it can't connect to it, it actually just boots in default, which is great because it's enabled us to get in and mess around with it. And it's also been validated by one of the community members, John, who I mentioned before on the channel, who also now has one of these. And he has had exactly the same thing, in that once he's booted, he was able to get into it with the default details, and his log information contained everything that the device was doing prior to it being unplugged, which is exactly the same as mine back when it was in service. Now, this isn't like the EAD boxes in that we've had to try and factory reset them. This just is running at default, which is great because I haven't had to deal with that headache. But getting this to work has been a headache. So the first thing is, unbeknownst to me at the time, this actually has a PME validation profile, which basically, when the Hatteras talk to each other, they are validating part of the bond and the PME profile that is actually in use. Now, the other big thing with this as well is, it's also trying to bond all 8 ports, and it'll try and bring them up in a sequential order from 1 to 8. And if one of them doesn't come up, it will drop the whole group and try and reconnect. I only discovered that after I even attempted to get this to try and sync. And in order to try and get this to sync, I had to change the handshake mode from ITU, which I believe is the SHDSL variant, over to IEEE, which is the EFM variant of the SHDSL protocol or standard. Only after I changed that, and also turned on EFM discovery, only after I did that did it actually start attempting to sync these lines. And that's when I noticed that a couple of them might come into sync, and then because I've only got 4 out of the 8 lines plugged in, or at the time it was only 2, it would then immediately drop the bond or the group and start syncing again. So I was trying to work out why that was happening. So I actually started trying to remove ports from the PME port list, which you can do by literally setting the bond group and removing them from it, so it's not trying to bond all of them. However, even doing that and actually turning off the aggregation in terms of bonding all of them together made no difference whatsoever. They literally outright refused to come up. They'd sync, even if there was only 2 in, it would come up, they'd sync, and they'd drop it straight away. I then discovered that the Hatteras has PME validation, and PME validation had its own profile, and that was HN408, which is a Hatteras network PME profile. Once it came into sync, it was trying to validate the PME profile was matching on both sides of the CPE, but also on the exchange side. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen because the Zhone isn't a Hatteras, so it was immediately dropping the bond group again and sync for absolutely everything. What I did discover, and this is partly where some of this config is now wrong, because I was originally trying this with a single line, but once I went into the bond group and actually removed PME validation, everything synced. And that's when I basically got to the point where all the services, all the lights were actually solid green, and they actually remained solid green until I turned the desk off. And then I had to redo it all, which again was a huge smile when it did actually come back up, and it proved what I was doing here was actually correct. As I said, some of this isn't going to be needed now, but the bond group is comprised of several things. So bond group 1001 is actually a default bond group when all of this comes up. Bond group 1001 has a PME group, which is here, which is PME validation group. Turning off a validation or turning it to none basically means it's not trying to validate it against the Hatteras network's predefined values, which for reference I have no idea what they are because I can't even find out how to list the PME profile that's already in place on this. Again, having so much of a fight with the command anyway, I kind of gave up. The fact that none seems to work and that it's not trying to validate it against anything was just a blessing in disguise, to be completely honest with you. So you have the bond group and then you have the PME validation, and it's similar to what we've got on the Zhone in that you've got the PME profile and then also you've got the PME groups that sit underneath it. It's very similar to this but slightly different wording. They all now seem to match. This again is just when I was messing around with a single port, I basically disabled the bond aggregation on it, disabled the PME validation, put in port group 1 and took it out, but I think this may be left over from what I was doing with this. Honestly, I can't remember. The bottom line is it is actually working in that it's showing it is in sync. So the next step is to actually jump over to the laptop, which I've already got set up here because I've plugged in the Ugreen. The laptop itself has nothing plugged into it at this moment in time. Hopefully the Hatteras is configured in exactly the same way as the RAD is, in that by default it will just pass across the ports as a bridge. Fingers crossed. I have no idea if that is going to be the case. Trying to work out anything on that Hatteras and the command to even see if that is what's happening. I have no idea where to start. I'm just going to plug it in and see what happens. It's not connected to Wi-Fi, so yeah, I'm going to start pinging. I'm going to plug the Ethernet cable in and hopefully we start to see a reply. So this is going to be a bit more difficult than I thought, but I have got the network cable in my hand, which you'll just have to trust me on is plugged into the Hatteras. I have the Winbox DHCP server set up here as well, so you can actually see, hopefully it just connect. I think what we'll probably do first of all is actually just load up a command window and just ping out to Google just so you can see that it's not connected to anything, and obviously the general failure is because there is nothing plugged into it. Now I have no idea if this is just going to work. I have no idea if the bond groups is set, or not bond groups, but bridging is set up on the Hatteras. I'm hoping that it just appears in the DHCP server, but I have literally no idea what is going to come up first, or even if this is just going to work. I'm just going to plug it in and see what happens. That just, oh my God, I was not expecting that. I honestly had visions of me having to go through the CLIs to try and bridge the EFM and the Ethernet side. Given everything I've been through with that, that was well in the realms of possibility. I was not expecting just to plug in and work. That, oh, that's such a weight off my shoulders. Has made all of this worthwhile, to be completely honest with you. That is so cool. I mean, it doesn't actually mean it's bonding. I suppose we should actually go and do a speed test on this to actually see what it's doing, because it could just be one line for all I know. Now we should be getting about 20 if it's doing all four. As 3, there's 18, 19. That is, I've just realised I can look at the screen up there as well on that. I've got to look down here as to where the mouse is because it's slightly laggy. Let's do an upload test. That is doing all 4 lines, and all 4 lines are actually flashing away on the Hatteras. That is so cool. I am so fortunate to be able to play around with all of this. And it's weird as well, because back when I used to use these, not physically install them, but back when we used to connect into them, I always wondered how all of this worked. And to be on the other side of it, it's just phenomenal, especially when it just works. When you put in all this time and effort to actually get this to the point where it does just work. Honestly, the sense of satisfaction just having it work, it's the best feeling ever. It really is. Honestly, if you don't mess around with anything or know nothing about it, go and play around with stuff, make stuff work. This is so cool. And I'm kind of lost for words, to be honest with you. Yeah, rambling, but I'm so happy. thank you to everyone that is sitting here watching one of my videos now. This channel wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for you guys. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for Zhone giving me all of this, although I did go and buy the Hatteras myself. But the Zhone DSLAM to do all this, just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I suppose the next thing really, to try and take this to the final step, is to bond all 8 lines. Now, in theory, I should be able to do that literally just by terminating another 4 ports on the DSLAM, although I need to work out the cables because the cabling is backwards, so I need to go and find out the colour code to work out what that is from ports 25 down or 24 on the Zhone. Anyway, and terminate that in. I need to make another cable, although actually I have got the Hatteras cable, which is in the box, but I'm going to need sockets for that, and I've only got 2 sockets down here because the rest are up in the attic. I think for ease, I'm just going to make up another Cat 5 plug with the cabling going off and the pairs going into it, because at the minute I've got 2 and 2, and they're both in 2 ports. And the reason I think this should just work is because channels 1 and 3 are online and 5 and 7 are online on those 2 separate ports in the back of the device. So setting up the other port should just be a case of terminating those pairs and adding them into the bond group on the Zhone. So I'm going to go and do that now, and if this works, I'm going to save the config, or at least work out how I need to save it, reboot it, and just live life as if it was back in 2012 on an EFM connection for a little bit. That is so cool. Right, I'll be back in a bit. Right, all 8 cables are made. I'll throw a picture up on screen now as to how that looks, because we are going straight into the IDC punchdown block. And I've just made the 4 pair cables up, which are identical to the one that actually came with it. Unfortunately, I only have 1 of these. This would have come with 2. I have the face plates, which is the BT to RJ45 socket specifically for the Hatteras, because I said it came as a kit, which I think I showed at the start of the video. I can't honestly remember now, but either way, I don't have the other cable, but it's really handy because the pinout's on the bottom of the box, and you can also trace it through the cables on the end as well. It's basically one of those without going into the sockets. The bond groups are set up. Now, interestingly, I've had to leave out port 17 because as I was connecting these came up. But port 8, which is port 17, because we're starting from 1 down, on the Hatteras just would not sync whatsoever. It was attempting over and over and over and over and over again, and it would just fail. If I go back to status and error statistics, I think it was on here, port 17 had 22 initializations, and I just gave up with it in the end. I swapped the cables around, and the problem actually followed the port on the DSLAM. So we actually ended up jumping across to port 16. I'll go back to where it was. Yeah, port 16, which is synced. All the lights are green. All 8 of them are green. On here as well, I believe, I should have checked this when I was on that page, but all 8 are up. So this should be 20 meg or thereabouts. Let's tell you what happens. Oh, that is just... I mean, it should have worked anyway. Everything was set up ready for it. But seeing it on the screen, it's just... Oh, it brings back... Being able to use this and seeing something that, as I said, that you have messed around with and played around with for such a long period of time, and to actually get it to the point where it is actually working is super cool. I'm so happy with myself, and yes, it hasn't been perfect. There was never going to be. You're trying to work something out where you have literally no idea how to set it up or 0 documentation. It's never going to be perfect, but that working just made my day. It is actually the 23rd of December as I'm recording this, so it's kind of a Christmas present to myself. Now, it actually opens up the door to a load of things we can do with this, because potentially we could also use this as the backhaul for the ADSL if we wanted to go really stupid, because effectively it's just passing traffic the whole way back through to port 6 on the CISCO. So Do we do ADSL over EFM backhaul across the advert back? Honestly, there's so many potential things we could mess around with. And maybe I'll do a few shorts over Christmas to see how that ends up. But I'm so cool that that works. That is super, super cool. That is ridiculous. I'm chuffed to bits, to coin a phrase from a certain YouTuber called Mumbo. That's awesome. I'm so happy. That's what I was getting a little concerned with port 8 not coming up. I did wonder if it was the Hatteras, but then when it followed the DSLAM, my heart sunk, because I was like, is it an issue with everything else afterwards? Because even terminating port 6 or 16, it didn't initially want to come up. Error statistics. Port 16. It did take a couple of initializations. Now all of these are, I don't know if this is like crosstalk between them all. I don't know where this error count has come from, but it did take 2 initializations to actually get this to come up. So I was a little bit concerned. All of these are just where we've been playing previously with bits, and this, in by no stretch of the imagination, is the total initializations. The device uptime is actually a lot less than that. I don't actually know if it's going to tell me the uptime in true Adam. It's not far off time and date, but it's certainly not that. As I said, it's the 23rd, but in true Adam fashion, it's certainly not up to date. We don't have that. I don't know where the uptime is. I can't remember where the uptime is. Does it really matter? Probably not. System, chassis view, controller. Anyway, it's not been on long, is what I'm getting at, because I was working in here with a new power supply to the bench, because I said I had to turn all of this off, and I turned that off, forgetting that that was well, turned up really. So yeah, right. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's go and jump to where I normally sit and run through this. So, as I said earlier, it is actually the 23rd of December. And before anyone turns around to me and says, Adam, you don't have any Christmas decorations up, I actually have my little kit LED Christmas tree set up, which I made from a kit several years ago. I've actually got a couple of them, and they're actually really super cool. Speaking of super cool, despite the headache that this has been setting all of this up, I have actually had a blast. And it's one of those where I say every day is a learning day, and this has been no different. It goes to show really just how, kind of a testament to the RAD. This just worked out of the box without any messing around, any configuration on it whatsoever. And it has actually been a joy to play with, including the Hatteras. The Hatteras has required a lot more work, obviously, to get it working, and I've only scratched the surface with these devices. There is so much more you can actually physically do if you go in and program these. You can program the actual point-to-point interfaces, so you can actually get into these remotely, segment off of the Ethernet side of stuff as well. There's an awful lot you can do with them, and as I said, maybe next year we'll get around to doing that. One of the things I can do next year is potentially bond more than 8 circuits. I do have access to some rather old aggregation software that would enable me to bond multiples of these devices together to give potentially 16 or even 32 circuits, which we can do, because obviously the DSLAM's got 2 cards in it. So that is something that I'm quite keen to get into. And maybe I will go and take the serial port and then give them a run for their money with bonding. However, I have tried to do that with the ADSL so far in the bonded CD, and it's not exactly gone to plan. So I may be starting a war that I can't win. But either way, there is an awful lot that I actually want to be doing next year as well. One of which is actually messing around with the UTEL. So I've actually got the head end here for this. This is actually just part of that. On the back end of this as well, if I can get everything without it falling over, we have all the auxiliary equipment that goes with it. Now, Zen have very kindly given me the plugin diagrams for all of this. I have no documentation for it. It seems to be a bit of a running theme at the minute, but I have no documentation for any of that other than the connection guide. And the connection guide seems to raise more questions than it actually answers. But it'd be really cool to get this in, because this actually tests from the exchange to the customer premises. I have no idea if this particular model actually tests for sync or if it's just copper line, but the diagram that Zen gave me actually include this within the Zhone and the ZYXEL ADSL DSLAM as well. So I'm assuming it does do sync information. Also, John, that I've mentioned a couple of times now, very kindly sent me a JDSU middle of the year actually. It'd be interesting to see how that talks to this, because you can have some JDSUs that talk to the head end, but that may be a JDSU to JDSU vendor thing, because you can get JDSU head ends as well. So there's a lot to come. So as I've said multiple times already, make sure you get subscribed. There is an awful lot upcoming, and it is the best way to support me and the channel. And supporting me and the channel, I have to give a massive thank you to Zen. If it wasn't for Zen, this channel would not exist in the format it does. We wouldn't have two MSANs now, and that's where this all started, was back with the ZYXEL ADSL DSLAM. Obviously, we now have the Zhone, and if it wasn't for the Zhone, then we wouldn't be messing around with cool technology such as SDSL and EFM, but we have been over the past couple of days. So Zen, thank you very much. If you are a residential customer and you are looking for residential broadband, go and check out Zen. The link is in the video description below. I also need to give a massive thank you to Structured. Structured is the company I work for, but they sponsor the connectivity out of here, which enables me to segment all the backhaul off of my home network and do all the cool stuff that we do with the carrier side of stuff, as well as all the IP addressing and ASN and other future bits that we've got coming up as well. So if you're a business customer or even residential, but also looking to partner to resell or white label telephony or broadband services, get in touch with Structured Direct, or reach out to me via the email address on the YouTube channel, or reach out to me on Discord. Speaking of Discord as well, the link for that is in the video description. Come and join. I would love to meet and speak to a load of you as well. We do so much in Discord other than talking about stuff on the channel, projects. There's even a marketplace in there now where people are getting rid of stuff, and I will be doing the same. Over Christmas I will be tidying up in here, so I'll be throwing a few things up on the marketplace. If you want the opportunity to get them and literally cover the cost of shipping, then jump on Discord. There'll be bits in there as well, but most of all, I would love to speak and talk to an awful lot of you. I don't think I have much more to say. Obviously, there is Patreon and the merchandise store, T-Mill. Yeah, T-Mill, who I get a lot of the merchandise through, who are actually the ones that print all this as well. This is actually filthy. But they have got an end of year sale coming up as well. So pay attention to that, because there'll be discounts on that as they remove old stock and get in new stock. Also Patreon, as I said, if you want to become a Patreon member, the link is in the video description. Make sure that you cover everything first and you feel comfortable. You don't have to do it, the option is there. It helps me fund everything that goes on in here. I also reach out to everyone direct, and I will throw up people's names in the YouTube videos as to the new patrons. But again, don't feel that you need to subscribe, but if you do want to give me some of your hard-earned money, then the link is in the video description below. And I think that is absolutely everything. Guys, if you are still here, you are absolutely incredible. I cannot thank you enough for watching and supporting me throughout the year. I'm hopeful to be able to get this video up either slightly before or slightly after Christmas. I'm just trying to work out in terms of time, but thank you. Guys, have an amazing Christmas, and I will see you next year. Take care.